You didn't click on this video by chance. Something bigger is happening. Maybe you can't explain why yet, but your spirit already knows. You know that things have happened in your life that defy rational explanation. Situations that seemed like the end but weren't, moments when death surrounded you, and yet you came out alive. And not just physically, you came out scarred, more sensitive, with that strange feeling that there is still something that needs to be understood. A type of survivor who is not content with just having stayed alive, because deep down, what haunts you now is no longer the fear of death, it is the mystery of why it did not take you. That question, which no one has ever answered, may be the only one that matters. Why was I spared? Why did I escape more than once when everything indicated that there would be no return? And if you feel that question burning inside you, like a silent pain that has never left you, then this message is for you. Because there are souls in this world that not only survive the impossible, they are strategically preserved, not to live an ordinary life, but because they carry something rare, precious, and irreplaceable. And when that mark manifests itself, not even death can touch it. Not even collapse can defeat it. Not even delay can prevent it. If this message has already made your heart race without explanation, if tears have come to your eyes without you knowing why, then don't ignore this sign. Comment 333 now. This number is more than a symbol. It is a vibrational response. It is a password in the spiritual world saying, I woke up. You have been protected more than once, and now it's time to find out why. Because when heaven decides to protect someone, it's because something much greater is about to awaken. And it all starts when you understand what divine protection really is. Have you ever stopped to really think about what it means to escape death more than once? Have you ever wondered why, at moments when everything seemed to indicate that it would be the end, something invisible intervened? Perhaps you attributed these episodes to luck, chance, fate. But none of that explains the intensity with which your life was spared in situations that destroyed so many others. The truth is that you were marked to escape. Not because you deserved it, nor by chance, but by purpose. Because when a soul carries within itself a mission that has not yet been fulfilled, the universe, heaven, the spiritor, whatever you prefer to call this, higher power moves to ensure that the cycle is not interrupted before its time. This is not spiritual fantasy. This is real protection, intentional, necessary, invisible to human eyes, but recognizable to those who have survived the inexplicable. Divine protection is not a shield that prevents pain. It does not function as a wall that separates us from difficulties. In fact, many of those chosen to be protected by this sacred force were precisely those who weathered the most violent storms. They bled, cried, and were crushed by situations that could easily have justified collapse. But they did not fall, or if they did fall, they did not remain on the ground. Because there was something sustaining them from within, even when everything around them was breaking apart. This protection is not about comfort, it is about continuity. It is as if time itself were adjusted in your favor. As if the invisible gears of existence turned to delay what seemed inevitable, just to give you one more chance. Not out of passive compassion, but because what you carry has not yet been revealed to the world. And until that revelation happens, death cannot touch you. Many chosen ones have been thrown, from the beginning of life, into contexts that seemed designed to destroy them. Unstable environments, fragmented families, unexplained illnesses, traumas that others could never endure. But it is precisely there, in this scenario of disorder, that the first sign of divine protection manifests itself. It is in the midst of war that the chosen one learns to feel the touch of the invisible even without knowing that they are being guided. And when you look back with greater awareness, you begin to notice the times when everything should have gone wrong, but something turned out differently. A delay that prevented you from being in the wrong place. A sudden intuition that steered you away from a dangerous path. Unexpected fatigue that made you give up on a trip that would have been fatal. Or even a painful breakup that you later understood was deliverance. This is no coincidence. It is spiritual technology in action. It is divine strategy being executed to perfection. While you still thought you were lost, those who are marked by purpose are also marked by protection. But this is not a spiritual privilege, as if there were favorites in heaven. It is an agreement made long before your birth, in plans that your eyes cannot yet remember, but that your soul knows well. An agreement that said, this one will carry something essential for the time to come. And so, even if everything tries to bring him down, he will be spared. That is why you feel this silent weight on your shoulders, this nameless urgency, this feeling that time is calling you to something greater, because you have already been saved. You have already been set apart. You have already been spared. And now it is time to awaken to the reason. Divine protection manifests itself in layers, sometimes as intuition, other times as interruption, sometimes as pain, other times as loneliness. And it takes sensitivity to realize that what seemed like delay was actually alignment, that what hurt was redirection, that what didn't work out was keeping you away from invisible traps. While you thought you were being forgotten, you were being hidden. Not forever, but until you were ready. Because true protection is not just saving you from death. It is preparing you for the life that will come after it. And if you escaped more than once, then it is because what lies ahead still needs you whole, present, awake, available. You're not breathing by accident, and the proof of that is what your own body has already experienced. The mind may doubt, but the spirit remembers. And if you feel something being activated inside you now, then get ready. Because what you escaped in the beginning was just the harbinger of a spiritual war that began long before you knew what it meant to be chosen. You may not remember clearly, but your soul remembers. Your first great battle took place long before you knew who you were. Perhaps it was while you were still in the womb, before your eyes saw the light of day. Complications during pregnancy, silent threats that almost prevented your arrival. Perhaps it was during childhood, when the fragility of your body hid the greatness of your soul. Unexplained illnesses, accidents that seemed ordinary, but carried too heavy an energetic charge to be mere chance. You may have been that child who was too quiet or too intense, sensitive without explanation, able to feel what others did not feel, to see what others did not see. And even without understanding, you already carried marks that the spiritual world recognized and feared. Because the first attack on your life was not physical, it was spiritual. What rose up against you was not an isolated accident, nor a random illness. It was a deliberate attempt to prevent your light from emerging. Darkness saw you long before you realized it. It identified the brightness of what you still carried hidden and decided to act. And that's why the blow came so early. Before you knew how to pray, before you had words, before you could discern what was right or wrong, because the goal was never to wait for you to grow up. It was to silence your mission while it was still in seed form. It was to interrupt the call before the voice existed, and that is why that first escape is so important. It was proof that, even though you were vulnerable, you were already protected. Many do not survive this first attack. Many succumb in childhood. And even those who survive sometimes carry scars that imprison them inside. But with you, it was different. You were wounded, perhaps even scarred, but not destroyed. There was an invisible shield around you, a spiritual covering that prevented the blow from being fatal. Maybe it was a doctor who showed up at the right time, a person who entered the room just as you were suffocating, a high fever that suddenly disappeared. Or maybe it was something even deeper, that night terror that paralyzed you, but that ceased with a prayer you didn't even know how to repeat properly. It was all real. They weren't just symptoms. They were wars. And each deliverance was confirmation that there were greater hands holding your existence. After that, something changed inside you. Maybe you didn't even notice it at the time, but there was an activation, a kind of sensitivity that became more acute, a strangeness with the world. A deeper silence, a kind of internal radar that began to detect the invisible, prophetic dreams, premonitions that were confirmed, sensations that accompanied you without explanation. All of this was awakened after your first deliverance, because that was not just a physical escape, it was a spiritual initiation. And, like every rite of passage, it left its mark. You were sealed. Registered in the invisible world as someone who could not be touched without higher permission, and that mark made you both a target and a protected one. You may have grown up feeling different, as if you didn't fit in, as if you were always carrying a weight that no one else could see, as if you were observing the world from the outside even though you were inside it. This feeling is not madness, it is heightened perception. It is the soul of someone who has undergone an invisible journey and returned with something that others do not have, and that is unsettling. It disturbs environments, unbalances people. You may never have understood why certain places made you uncomfortable, why certain looks pierced you with gratuitous hostility, why, even without doing anything, you provoked intense reactions in those around you. The answer lies in what you have carried since that first battle, a frequency that reveals your spiritual origin. Death tried, the system tried, invisible forces tried, but none of them could stop you. And even if you didn't understand it at the time, even if you grew up thinking that life was just difficult by chance, now you begin to remember. Because your soul always knew that something greater was being woven behind the scenes. And if you've made it this far, with internal scars, but alive, lucid, and more spiritually sensitive than ever, it's because the first attempt failed. The first arrow was deflected, and the first portal was opened. And from that moment on, time ceased to be linear. You began to walk between two worlds, touching matter with your feet, but with your spirit still partially anchored in your origin. That is what makes you different. That is what made you escape. And that is exactly what the enemy tried to prevent you from discovering who you really are. But the discovery has already begun. And what has been awakened in you can no longer be put to sleep. Not every attempt at death comes from outside. Some approach silently, disguised as fatigue, despair, and emptiness. And sometimes, the most lethal blow is not the one that bleeds the body, but the one that slowly dissolves the meaning of existence. Perhaps you know this kind of pain well. The pain that does not show up on tests, that does not attract visitors or cries for help, but which consumes the soul as if there were a dark pit inside you. A bottomless abyss that suddenly begins to call your name. And the scariest thing is that no one notices. On the outside, you smile, you do your tasks, you function. But inside, something is dying in silence. That was the second attack. The most treacherous, the most disguised, the most dangerous. Because it doesn't scream, it whispers, it doesn't explode. It falls asleep. It settles in slowly and convinces your mind that there is no longer any reason to continue. It is not a passing thought. It is a state of mind, an exhaustion that cannot be cured by sleep, a loneliness that is not alleviated even by the presence of others, a persistent feeling of being disconnected from life, as if something essential had been lost along the way. You may have lived through this in silence. You may have carried this weight for months, maybe years. And even though you tried to pretend that everything was fine, there was a hole opening up inside your spirit. But there was a moment, a tiny instant, an almost imperceptible breath where everything could have broken apart for good. Perhaps it was during a sleepless night, in hidden tears, in a wordless prayer, in a moment when you truly believed you couldn't take it anymore. And it was precisely there when nothing else made sense, when faith seemed fragile, when pain seemed more real than any promise that something sacred moved in your favor. It didn't come with noise. It didn't come with lights. But it came. A thought that broke the cycle. A gesture from someone you didn't expect. A song that played at just the right moment. A simple "I'm here" that prevented the final fall. And you didn't know it at the time, but heaven had just intervened. Your soul, even though exhausted, was protected from total surrender. The enemy knew he couldn't bring you down from the outside, so he tried from within. He tried to make you give up on yourself. He tried to convince you that your light was useless, that you were a burden, that your calling was an illusion. And for a while, it may have worked. You may have believed that you were finished, that there was no way out. But what he didn't expect was that the Spirit knew you better than your own wounds. And even with your heart broken, something in you resisted, not by your own strength, but by spiritual protection. There was divine cover over your mind. Even when it seemed to collapse, there were invisible shields surrounding your thoughts, even when they seemed to conspire against you. And if you survived that, then you have already won one of the most difficult wars of all, the war against your own emptiness. That is why this deliverance is so precious, because it left no visible scars. It left wisdom. It taught you to read the invisible, to perceive who is smiling on the outside but bleeding on the inside. It refined your listening. It deepened your compassion. It cleaned up the excesses, and it put you in front of a mirror where you finally saw not who the world said you were, but who heaven always knew you would be. The pain didn't kill you. It prepared you. It gave you authority, not the kind that comes from titles, but the kind that comes from conquered silence, from the dark night of the soul pierced with tears and faith without words. The truth is that those who have conquered their own abyss carry a kind of presence that the whole world recognizes without understanding, a comforting gaze, a calming voice, a welcoming energy. Because the soul that almost gave up and didn't carries a wisdom that no theory can teach. And now, you carry that. Because you came back, you rose again, and even without knowing how, you are here. And that means the worst is over, and that now you carry a kind of strength that no one else can take away from you, not even the battles to come. There are deliverances that happen in the realm of emotion, others in the silent battle of the soul. But there is a type of deliverance that marks the body, that paralyzes time and leaves memories that return in the form of goosebumps and deep sighs. These are the moments when death presents itself without disguise. When danger is not metaphorical, it is physical, visible, unquestionable. A runaway car, a gunshot fired, bleeding that won't stop, a surgery that goes wrong, violence that happens before your eyes, and suddenly you find yourself between two worlds, Everything slows down. The sounds around you become distant. Your body responds with panic or absolute silence. And everything inside you understands, even if only for a second, this could have been the end. But it wasn't. And the fact that you are here now, reading these words, is proof that something intervened, something bigger, something that, at that exact second, stood between you and what would come next. Maybe it was a driver who braked instinctively, a doctor who decided to try one more time, a stumble that took you out of harm's way, or simply a minute's delay that saved you from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. People around you may have said it was luck, that it was coincidence, that you narrowly escaped. But you know, your spirit knows, it wasn't luck, it was intervention, it was purpose. Because when a life carries a divine calling, even death must ask permission. And on that day, in that place, the answer was no. And that's why you didn't just survive. You were spared. And not just spared, you were sealed with something that cannot be erased. Since then, even if you don't talk about it often, there is a living awareness within you. A memory that came back every time you closed your eyes. A moment that repeats itself in your mind as if asking to be understood. And now you understand. That was not the end, because there was still something to be released through your existence. Some carry scars on their bodies, others only memories too heavy to be verbalized. But both have something in common. They were touched by a kind of protection that does not depend on perfect faith or well-formulated prayers. It depends on a plan, and your plan is still in progress. That is why the impact came but did not end. The threats surrounded you but did not consume you. You bled, perhaps. You were scarred, for sure. But you remained. And it is this remaining that announces to the spiritual world that the time of the chosen one is not yet over. That your breath still has a destination. That your steps still have a sacred purpose. And even if you felt small after that, even if you cried alone asking, "Why me?" heaven was answering you without words. Because you still carry what the world needs to hear. This near-death experience, as traumatic as it was not a punishment. It was a spiritual reboot. A violent rupture between what you were before and what you needed to become afterwards. You did not come back the same. No one does. Something breaks inside and, at the same time, something awakens. A part of you dies, yes. The deluded, distracted, superficial part. But another part is reborn with a lucidity that the world cannot erase. And that is why, since then, you no longer fit in the same places. Futile conversations tire you. People's haste bothers you. The noise of routine seems distant. Because you saw, even if only for a moment, what few can see. You were on the threshold. You touched the edge between here and the beyond. And now you carry the reflection of that in your gaze. In the silence, in the vibration. That's why people feel your presence before they hear your voice. That's why animals follow you. That's why some avoid you for no reason. Your energy was washed away on the threshold of death and returned with redoubled purpose. This third deliverance was not just an accident avoided. It was a mark on your destiny, a spiritual declaration that says, nothing can interrupt the plan before the appointed time. And even if other threats come, even if danger approaches again, you now carry a new conviction that no force in this world can break what has been established between your soul and the high. And if you have already survived this kind of attack, then the time has come to understand why all these escapes have an invisible thread connecting them, and what that thread says about your mission. Chosen one, take a breath. Let everything you've just remembered settle into the bones of your being. Let it echo where no words have ever reached before. Because by now, you know the truth. You weren't just spared once. You were pulled back from the edge multiple times, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and not a single one of those escapes was random. Every survival was a declaration. Every delay was a divine recalibration. Every interruption in your destruction was heaven whispering, "Not yet. This one still carries something the world needs." You see, you were never overlooked. You were never forgotten. You were not abandoned by God, nor cursed by fate. You were hidden, guarded, delayed not as punishment, but as preservation. While others ran ahead, you were kept behind, not because you were weaker, but because your timing had to be perfect. And now, it's catching up. You feel it, don't you? That soft, sacred pressure in your chest. That inner trembling that says, something is about to shift. That's not imagination. That's alignment. That's destiny remembering your name. The enemy tried everything. It came for your body, your mind, your purpose. It surrounded you with chaos. It wrapped you in confusion. It whispered lies in moments of stillness. But even in your most fragile state, your spirit refused to surrender. And that, chosen one, is why you are still here. You are not just someone who lived, you are someone who was chosen to continue. Your pain didn't bury you, it forged you. Your delays weren't detours, they were divine protections. Your tears were never wasted. They watered the roots of something the world has not yet seen bloom. You are walking proof that protection doesn't always look like safety. Sometimes it looks like survival. Sometimes it looks like loss, delay, loneliness, or silence. But in truth, it is heaven's hand rerouting your story so that you emerge at the exact moment when the world is ready to receive what only you can release. That moment is now. No more waiting, no more shrinking, no more pretending you didn't feel the shift. You didn't escape death just to play it small. You didn't survive all of that to walk through life half awake. So, from this moment on, walk like one who knows why the grave had to wait. Speak like one whose voice is loaded with the wisdom of survival. Love like one who was pulled from the fire for a sacred reason. And remember, you are not defined by what tried to kill you. You are defined by what couldn't. And what couldn't was darkness itself, because heaven was louder. You were delayed, but never denied. You were wounded, but never abandoned. You were targeted, because you were dangerous to the dark. And now that you know who you are, walk in it. And if these words reached a place in you that no one else has ever touched, if something inside you whispered, "This is me," then this isn't the end of your journey, it's the beginning. Subscribe now to Rise of the Chosen so you never miss the confirmations, awakenings, and messages that your spirit is finally ready to receive. Because from here on, your path will not be walked alone. Heaven has been speaking, and now you are listening. You are not just alive. You are awakened, and you were never meant to return the same.